Episode 21, I believe, of the Fuzz Club. We're talking about Faerie Ring's Weary Traveler. Came out in April of this year on King Volume. And Todd White of King Volume was nice enough to hook us up with some vinyl to listen to going into this. So appreciate that, King Volume and Todd White there. So before we get going, let's do some quick intros and we'll roll. Blake, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I'm Blake from Aiwass.
Robb?
Robb from Hashtronaut.
Eddy?
I'm Eddy from Lords of the Opium Church and the Endless.
Right on. So, Weary Traveler from Faerie Ring. This is their second album. These dudes are from Indiana, like Evansville, Indiana, I think. So some Midwesterners, fellow Midwesterners. I got a video from James Walwork, their lead guitarist and vocalist. Vocalist, and I don't know if he's a lead guitarist. He's a guitarist, I guess I should say. But I'll play that for you. It gives a little bit of insight into the band and the album and all that kind of stuff. It was cool. So thanks to James for sending that to us, and maybe that'll kick things off for us a little bit. So,
heck yeah.
Oops.
Hey guys, this is James from Faerie Ring. Nice to see you. Here to talk with you about the new Weary Traveler album that we're so excited to share with you guys. So here it is. So a little bit about Faerie Ring as a band. We're four guys that come from like punk and hardcore, where being an individual, being original is utmost importance. It's vital to us. It's crucial. It can't be generic. We have to do our thing our way. And that is like what has basically led us to doing Weary Traveler, you know, in the studio that we chose it to do it in, and in the style that we did it in, and all of that. So we were striving to like achieve the glory of rock, like, you know, ultimate rock. Weary Traveler to me is like a chance to write some fantasy drenched poetry in a way that people can relate to. Lyrically isn't very complicated, you know, but sonically has to make sense with the rest of the music. So I hear that there's some gearheads around the slightly fuzzed community, so I must indulge just a little bit about like the nitty-gritty details of, you know, what we brought to Postal in Indianapolis. Me and Kyle, the other guitarist in Faerie Ring, both use first generation Sun Model Ts. It's a given, you know, it's the best fucking amp of all time. They're worth the hype. If you don't got one, you wish you did. If you're recording a tape, you know, using the best amps of all time, it's kind of hard to get a shitty tone. Personally, I like playing a really cheap guitar through a really nice amp just to prove a point that it really is all in the amp. If you wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of things, like knowing what pedals I'm running or even some of the riffs I'm playing, I made a YouTube playthrough of the song Lover. If you type it in on YouTube, I'm sure you'll find it. And if you do see my ugly mug on there, don't forget to like and subscribe, you fuckers. Well, anyway, Slightly Fuzzed, thank you for letting me chat, and I hope to do a more personal conversation. And if you have any more insights, feel free to ask, and play guitar and ride a bike and let one rip. Take it easy.
All right. That was awesome. That was like above and beyond what I was hoping for from him. So, you know, shout out to you guys from Faerie Ring and James specifically for putting all that together and giving us some details. He might make a good
fun way to kick it off right there.
Yeah, that was awesome. He might make a good addition to the Fuzz Club at some point.
Yeah, sure.
Oh yeah, we got to get that dude on here for sure.
Yeah. So, what do you guys think about this album after seeing that kind of stuff and getting some insight from James?
So I had two thoughts from that video. One, it made 100% sense to me that they come from punk and hardcore listening to this. There's a melodic structure to Faerie Ring. It's one of the things I like most about this album. That you can hear certain punk elements to it. I know not necessarily everyone associates melodic natures with punk, but I mean they're catchy songs. And the second one was, I've got to kick this over to Robb about is the Sun Model T first generation the best amp?
I mean, I do. We definitely caught eyes as soon as you started talking gear. I'm a second generation Model T guy. I love the red knobs, the mid control. I'm a second generation guy, but any Model T is a good Model T. Even the Fender reissues are amazing. If you can get your hands on one, definitely do so. Is it the best amp? I mean, that's it's a tough question for this kind of stuff. If I was playing guitar in the band Faerie Ring, I would want a Sun Model T for sure.
Yeah.
It's for what they're going for that like monsters of rock, like 70s vibe, like, that. Yeah, absolutely. The amp was made specifically for that sound. So you're not going to beat it.
Yeah. I was watching a live video on YouTube of them last night, and I seen they're playing those Sun amps, and it's like, yeah, it all makes sense now. Like the sound.
Oh yeah, you could hear it immediately.
Yeah, I would have guessed orange or sun.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan, for the gear diversion.
No, I'm glad you guys can roll with that, because I can't. I wouldn't know the fucking first thing about any of it.
Man, I could go on for the whole episode. I could talk about Sun Model Ts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I thought it was cool that they're talking about. I mean, it goes back to the punk ethos that they clearly hold very valuable to them, that they play cheap guitars out of nice amps.
Yeah.
Because I mean, personally, none of my guitars are that expensive. I play like mid to low priced guitars, so I jive with that. Like, my first album was recorded on a Schecter that I got when I was 15.
Nice. There you go.
So I really dig that ethos that they're talking.
Yeah, absolutely. But like the other side of the coin is they are going into a Sun Model T, and like in my band we play mat amps. And like, you just put a mat amp on top of a full stack, and people in the crowd immediately, it's a very gear centric genre. Mm-hmm. So to go out, that's just pulling a huge dick out on stage and just slapping it on the table, like people, and there's two sides to that coin, even because now people are going to have expectations. You better be able to, if you're going to put a Sun Model T on that stage, you better be playing $5,000 worth of fucking riffs,
I mean, I've got a Laney in the background. Eddie's got a Mesa Boogie dual rack in the background.
Oh yeah,
dual rack.
That's a Mesa 400 plus bass amp.
Yeah,
and then
that's a meaty bastard right there.
Yeah, it's like 500 watts.
Heck yeah,
not enough.
It never is. It never is.
No.
So one of the other things that he kind of alluded to in there was just kind of like some experimentation stuff that they like doing, and the amps kind of play into that and stuff. But just from their Bandcamp page, I thought it was kind of interesting, and I'll just share a little bit of it. But let's see where to start here. Weary Traveler is a marked step forward in the band's songwriting and recording process. Traveler delivers a coordinated, deliberate buffet of cohesive songs, meticulously written, blah, blah, blah. Just as important was the being professionally recorded at Postal Recording Studio by Alex Kircheval of the legendary rock band Coven. And under his guidance, the band recorded directly to tape, took numerous opportunities to experiment in the studio. And to that point, beginning a Lover, one of our singles, we have a section that sounds like it's coming through the radio. Alex did this by broadcasting the raw tape tracks over AM radio, then recording the radio, dialed it in, then bounced that through a series of outbound preamps for about 15 seconds. It was amazing. Experimentation was a key part of the creative process in Weary Traveler. Silver Man in the Sky, another single, the band wanted the sound of an anvil. So they took an iron skillet, which the band wound up cooking with a few hours later, into the recording booth and bashed it with a hammer in front of a $20,000 Telefunken microphone. Kyle recalls there was a moment in the song where we were sending a signal from the Steinway piano worth more than my house through a death by audio fuzz delay in a Sun Model T. I felt like the mad scientist. So
awesome.
Yeah, a little more insight. I thought that was cool. All of it seems pretty cool, just experimenting and recording that way.
It was something I was going to mention, was it does sound like it was recorded to tape.
Yeah.
I didn't get the I haven't listened to it on vinyl yet. I've just been, streaming on Spotify and stuff. But like it does have that, like, I wasn't sure if it was like an emulation or what. The studio stuff is that's where my gear knowledge kind of tapers off. But it had that, like, for lack of a better word, like vintage vibe,
Yeah, it's that warm sound, that full.
Yeah, the difference between a tube amp and a solid state amp. It's not really anything tangible, but it's something.
But if you know, you know.
Right, and that's kind of what the album had, that like warm tube feel of just, like it sounded like a Thin Lizzy record, or something like that, where I had that, you could tell it just sounded like tape,
Yeah.
A lot of recordings nowadays, you get like there's no decay on your notes and everything's so digitized and clean, and it sounded raw and definitely experimental. I mean, finding out that they did things like hitting skillets with mallets, that doesn't surprise me at all. The album is experimental, is probably be the adjective I would use to describe it most, honestly. Even within the genre, it's very experimental.
That's one of the things that I liked about this album a lot, and I like it even more now that I have that background information.
100%.
Because I mean, I think Ryan, you and I were talking about this last night. Like, one of the things I'm always looking for in new music, new bands, or bands that have been around for a while and are just still putting out new music, is innovation. I'm looking for, don't just rehash something, or don't just say, I love these bands, so I'm going to try and sound like these bands. Instead, like, put your own twist, try some fucked up shit, do the wrong things and see what happens.
That's what makes this like a really interesting like combination of those two completely separate ideas of being like experimental and trying some weird things, plugging a bad guitar into a good amp, or whatever it is, bashing a pan or whatever. But there's also like the side of them that's clearly influenced by everything that's already been done, like from the logo and the album art to the like kind of Sabbath sound to like old equipment. Like, it's clearly this nod to a different era while also just trying whatever they want at the same time, which I think is why it works.
It's easy to get lost in that aesthetic, and I think that's what they do. They do a good job of like still being themselves, because it's real easy to be like, oh, we're called Faerie Ring and we're all gonna wear costumes, and I see a lot of bands doing that, and it's cool to lean into your aesthetic, but you lose a little bit of yourself when you're doing that. When you're got big lamb chops and a leather vest and you got your bell bottoms on, and we get it. You're going for a 70s vibe, but you're going to lose a little bit of yourself. And I think that's, probably that punk and hardcore influence in them. Like he said, like, being ourselves is, key, and that's a priority for them. And you can tell, you can hear it in the music,
Yeah.
You can see on their live videos too on YouTube. I was watching, like, and they're really like enjoying themselves on stage and
yeah, exactly,
doing their own thing. They don't really care what everyone thinks, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some of their live stuff, and in general, there are certain elements of their stuff that reminded me of a band that we covered way back when this all started, of Rickshaw Billy's Burger Patrol. I think that, like, on a surface level, you'd be like, those two bands have nothing in common at all.
Sure. Yeah.
But there's a playfulness in both bands that extends beyond just the music, and just kind of their ethos and their vibe, their look, their everything. So that was something that I actually found kind of cool, because especially in like the stoner doom world, and especially like you show up and you set up and you got your Sun Model Ts or your Mad MGT 120s or whatever, and everyone's like, all right, they're going to be wearing black shirts, they're going to be wearing blue or black jeans, they're going to have beards and long hair, or beards and no hair.
I'm getting there.
Yeah, one day you will join our ranks.
Well, it's easy to not experiment when you have all that going for you already, and to get lost in the 70s or whatever, and all the aesthetic ways, whether it's the album art or your clothes or whatever. It's easy to like not experiment, because why would we need to? We're a retro band. We're doing something, that clearly people already know what to expect here. So it's easy to just not experiment. And the fact that they do want to keep trying different stuff and shit is like, I respect that.
That recording through the radio thing, like that's really cool. Like, I'm sure they could have very easily downloaded some sort of plugin for their DAW, and
Plenty of
one
them.
click they could have done it, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the fact that they, you know, took it upon themselves to do it like the old school way, like again, just nods back to that punk rock mentality of just
DIY.
Exactly. We're just going to do it with what we got, but like, you know, do it in a cool way that still is aesthetically pleasing. Because I feel like, you know, that's kind of the other side of the punk aesthetic, is it doesn't really serve the consumer as much. It's more just like, fuck it, we're punk, you know?
Mm-hmm.
We're like, they're still putting out a very polished, very solid product while like doing it in a very DIY punk rock kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially because I don't know, I'm guessing, Rob, you come from hardcore, right? Yeah. So I come from punk before metal. It was punk and black metal for me when I was like 12, 13.
Yeah, I was a New York City hardcore kid.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I just love hearing stories about that. Like, it'll take an album that, you know, if I was enjoying it but not, you know, super sold on it, if I hear stories like that, I'm immediately going to be much more enthusiastic about not only taking another listen, but about appreciating the finer details. And that's what I'm looking for in music. I'm looking for something that I can pick apart and hear a ton of shit.
Yeah.
I find the vocals are like, they stand out a lot compared to everything to me. Just the effect they have on there and the style that he's singing. That was kind of my one bugaboo with the record, was the vocals. I felt like everything was super cohesive, and the vocals themselves aren't done poorly or anything. It's just I found myself every time that there wasn't vocals for a while, and then the vocals would start, I would be like, oh, whoa, what's that? Like, it was kind of, but then after a line or two, it settles back in. But it did seem like, you know, almost kind of like they got recorded separately and then just put together. I don't know. Not even that it was anything negative about the album. It was just kind of the one thing where like I said, if a couple minutes would go by and it was just instrumental, I'd be like really getting into it, and then vocals would come and it would kind of take me off guard a little bit.
So for me, here's how I kind of thought of the vocals, because I had a similar initial reaction when I first heard it.
But kind of harken back to what you just said though, about like the more you learn about how things come about, the more you understand it, and that's kind of, I have a different perspective immediately.
Well, and for me, I was talking with Ryan about this before we started recording. Essentially, what I hear when I listen to Faerie Ring is like Dio era Sabbath instrumental, but with Ozzy era Sabbath vocals.
Okay, all right,
I can see that.
And so, and like, I mean, I don't like Dio era Sabbath because I fucking hate Dio. I think that Tony Iommi and Bill Ward and Geezer Butler on Heaven and Hell arguably did some of their finest work. So it's not a diss on Faerie Ring when I say that, but fuck Dio.
That's how you really feel.
Yeah. So in a way, I heard that and I was like, huh, this is strange. This is a strange combination.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, oh, wait, what is the one thing that I would have changed about Heaven and Hell? And that's put Ozzy on vocals instead of Dio.
Yeah.
And so something that initially I was like, I struggled a little bit with in terms of kind of like you were saying, Rob, that kind of difference in terms of the instrumentation and the vocals. I think it comes from that.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I was saying, like learning how they're experimenting like that and doing strange things, it makes a little bit more sense. And like even just hearing him say, I forget exactly what he was, but it was like fantasy rock or something like that. He had said like right at the beginning of the video, and I was like, as soon as he said that, it kind of like how the vocals were and like how it played with the instrumentation kind of made a little bit more sense when you approach it from that like kind of power metal sort of, you know, glory metal kind of stance, and instead of looking at it like a stoner record, you know.
Yeah,
I thought that was kind of like, because I heard a lot of new wave of British heavy metal, like you know, especially like
kind of that like British glory metal, you know.
Yeah, you know, like Judas Priest, even though my buddy's a big new wave British heavy metal fan. It's like Judas Priest isn't new wave British heavy metal, and I'm like,
I mean,
but it's got that vibe, that like fist in the air,
yeah, like real swanky. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's got a strut to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like
yeah, and I don't want it to come off like I didn't like the vocals or anything. Like I said, it was kind of like the one thing that I noticed that wasn't like, because like even they said in that thing, like they made a very cohesive piece of music, like all the way through it works. The album, you put it on and it plays very cohesively all the way to the end. The dynamics are all at the right time and everything works perfectly. And then the vocals just kind of stood out, and it wasn't negatively stood, they just stood out.
Yeah. Eddie, what were you gonna say?
No, just with that like new wave of British heavy metal kind of vibe, with the like riffing that on the open A string, catching notes while the A is open, that kind of vibe. That's what I was getting at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of those like hallmarks of that kind of 80s.
Yeah.
Because you meant, Rob, you mentioned like that 70s like power of rock and roll type stuff. I almost heard like late 70s, but more like early 80s metal in this. The good shit, not like Warrant or something.
Yeah, it is interesting now knowing kind of their background of like all the different elements they've combined, because there is like kind of this throwback, but it also is experimental, but it's also like I would say that fantasy and doom is almost the opposite of like punk and stuff like that. So to see all those different things come together on a record is pretty interesting.
But the key there is punks and metalheads have the same dirty secret, and that's that we're all a bunch of fucking nerds.
Listen, I'm not a nerd. You're a nerd, all right?
You're a fucking nerd. Just de facto.
Yeah, it's just different patches on the denim vests. That's it.
Yeah.
I did love the artwork. I wanted to bring that up because it fits this whole thing that they're doing really, really well.
Oh, the aesthetic was tits.
Yeah, it was spot on from start to finish. And it was actually done by three different people. So the art itself was done by Jerry Hyonis, I think. He goes by Wormwalk on Instagram, WYRM Wormwalk, and the logo was done by Daniel Porta from the Fit Forge. And then there was another person that did the actual layout of it. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Chris Allison, I believe.
That's I believe Chris is with King Volume.
Okay. So, I mean, that's pretty unique in itself. I mean, it takes multiple people to put something like this together, but it fits everything really, really well. This looks like a heavy metal record from the early 80s or something. I mean, the colors, the like chrome logo, the fantasy of it all,
Mm-hmm. It just like screams like 1979 to 1982 to me.
Yeah.
Holy Diver.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's it's not often that you get a logo and an aesthetic and the artwork and just everything works perfectly together. Like that's what the record sounds like, is what that looks
even
like,
the back of the album here. I mean, it's kind of small. I guess I could stop sharing my screen, but the back of it, just their band photo and everything. And I saw them posting kind of jokes about it. Huh?
The Kill 'Em All thing.
Yeah, it looks kind of exactly like the back of the Kill 'Em All record. And I don't know if that was decided ahead of time or if it was a coincidence. I mean, it's awfully close if it wasn't decided ahead of time, but it's true. I mean, it's like it looked exactly like it, just down to the last detail, just the font, the layout, the clothes, this straightforward look photo, like everything about it just kind of like it really fits. They thought about this project from start to finish and executed,
Yeah, it all works really well together, and that's tough to do. It really is. It's tough to get the right artwork for the right, and like even down to like their guitar tone fits the aesthetic, like just everything, and just like cohesive is absolutely the best word to describe it. It's just it all works, it all plays well together. It's just so cohesive.
Now that I'm thinking about it, like I knew about Faerie Ring like a year and a half ago, and it was because they posted something on Instagram, and it just happened to like catch a hashtag. It was like, you know, doom metal or something like that, and it came up on my feed, and it kind of goes back to all this stuff, like the attention to details, experimenting, you know, doing it right with the right equipment, and like he was talking about recording on the tape and then playing it back through the radio and all this kind of stuff. So the photos they had shared like 2 years ago was this amp that they took out into like the woods, and they smashed a guitar like through the amp, and they wanted to take this photo of it, and they wanted to use the photo. I think it was maybe for a t-shirt, or I don't know what it was. And I remember looking at it and being like, you could just Photoshop that, right? Like, you don't have to destroy an amp or a guitar through this. Like, it's so easy to do this on a computer. I could have helped you do that for nothing. And I don't remember what I commented, but was like, you know, Photoshop exists, you know? And they responded like, yeah, but it just wouldn't be the same. Like, it's got to be like this way, you know? And they did it right. And at the time, I just thought like, wow, I would have just Photoshopped it personally. But now, like, kind of listening to this record and hearing them talk about it and hearing that attention to details and shit, like, it all kind of makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that was interesting is that the guy who recorded them, like, have any of you guys really listened to Coven very much?
I used to be in a math rock band a few years ago, and I got really into like, dude, it's so much fun to play that stuff, man. It's so much fun. But so I kind of like started dipping my toes into that, like, you know, really sweet, picky guitar nerdy stuff. And I forget what that girl's name is from that band, but she's an amazing guitar player. But yeah, I haven't listened to it in a long time now.
Yeah, so if it's the Coven I'm thinking of, because I think there might be multiple Covens. Coven predates Black Sabbath. They came out with their first album like a year before Black Sabbath did, and their vocalist, she's always been like, yeah, Black Sabbath like ripped us off. Like Coven even had a song, I believe, called on their first album called Black Sabbath.
Oh.
Very occult, Devil's Triad, all that kind of stuff. And so if it's the same Coven that I'm thinking of, and I could sound like an absolute asshole and, you know, when this is released, but I think it shows an interesting appreciation for the history of the genre that they had someone in that band record them.
Yeah. If that does end up being the same Coven, which I would love to be wrong on this one, but I would assume it's probably the newer Coven, because those dudes are probably in their 70s, you know?
I was trying to do the math. Yeah, they've got to be pretty old at this point.
That's what I think of when I think of Coven, at least. So
yeah, there's a newer band, Coven. The girl's name is Yvette Young, I believe, and she's just a phenomenal guitar player. But I also could be very wrong too. I'm in a band called Hashtronaut, so it's not really a brains operation over here.
This is why, Ryan, we need like a full-time producer to start looking these things up for us, so none of us.
I know.
Yeah, so we're just not being like, oh, what's this dumb high thing I think I know?
Yeah.
I feel like we've done pretty good so far, though. I mean, there were some interesting little tidbits in here, so I think we've done all right.
I'd love to get fact-checked.
Yeah. So the album before this, does anyone know the album before this? I was just curious.
Actually am not. This was my first experience with Faerie Ring, so
Was
their last album kind of like cohesive like this from concept? Like, is it
level?
No.
This is in one of the things that I've enjoyed in doing this podcast for as long as we have is that a lot of times I've noticed a trend where we have chosen like a second or a third album. And this is part of that trend. And it really shows in this album, you know, and this is not like a diss on their first album, but they took a really big step forward in terms of the cohesiveness of the sound, in terms of just the recording. The riffs are a lot heavier, I feel like, this time. So there's definitely a step forward, and you can tell that they're really, really thinking about how to construct an album now.
Hmm.
You know, like a friend of mine once told me, like, the first album that a band releases is the album they've been writing their entire lives, and the second album they write is the first album that they write when they know how to write. And I think that kind of carries through to Faerie Ring. You know, like they really, I know we say this all the time, but they matured. You know, they grew. They got better as musicians, better as writers, better as riff writers, vocal pattern writers, melodic writers, lyricists, all of it.
At some point, we should do an album that's not mature at all. It's just fucking just chaos and amateurish, and just do something.
Cowboys and Aliens.
Yeah, I would love to do Cowboys and Aliens. Yes, great suggestion, Blake. Let's do that.
Yeah.
In fact, let's do that for the next episode.
I'm busy in 2 weeks. Sorry.
Yeah, I unfortunately didn't know about these guys, and until this album. It wasn't right when the album dropped. I found out about these guys when they started promoting this album, and I listened to a little bit of their older stuff, just in kind of preparation for this episode. But I wasn't as familiar with Blake as Blake was, and it's kind of a bummer because I would have loved to have seen that progression and gotten a taste of their earlier stuff to be even that much more impressed now with the product that they're putting out, because it's a great album. It's like I said, it's just super duper cohesive.
Yeah,
it would have been nice to see a little bit of that evolution, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first time hearing them too, just for this podcast. Really blown away. Love the album.
Yeah, I saw lots and lots of people talking about it on Instagram and Twitter and stuff like that. So it seems to be doing pretty well. I think it did all right on the Doom charts. I don't remember where it came in on the Doom charts. 5. Okay. Yeah. And I don't remember hearing a whole lot about them prior to this. So it seems like it was a big step forward, and a lot of people have noticed that. So
yeah, they're blowing up.
Hard rock album on Bandcamp for a few days.
Oh shit, nice.
Yeah, when it first came out, they were above some pretty notable bands.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's a whirlwind, man. They're definitely blowing up.
Yeah. You had mentioned lyrics in their maturity. So to take a big leap into immaturity, I decided to do a little lyric game here. Just a few. Let me see. So here's a lyric from their album, and you guys can decide what you think the missing lyric is. Silverman pulled out his blank, raised it to the sky. Did the Silverman pull out his axe, his wiener, his teeth, or his sword?
It's got to be wiener.
I'd say wiener for sure.
I'm hoping it's wiener.
We'll see just how mature these guys are, I guess. It's axe. It's not wiener.
Would have been better with wiener. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. We should have known. There's a big silver axe on the cover of the album, not a big silver wiener. So
it's unfortunate. I can help them with that though if they'd like me to slightly fuzz their album up.
The next one, they got
Maybe they're really into Freud, and they were like, "Hey, it's an axe."
Tantalizing fever in my blank will explode if I let go. Tantalizing fever in my head, in my wiener, in my mind, or in my loins.
This one must be wiener.
Yeah, this one's got to be wiener for sure.
Tantalizing fever in their loins. Okay. Yeah,
it's in their mind.
Wrong again. All right.
Stare at the devil in your mind. Will I let him blank me?
Wiener me.
Will I let him bang me, cuddle me, kill me, or guide me?
I hope it's cuddle.
Yeah.
They seem like cuddly guys.
Yeah.
Cuddle with the devil? It's actually guide. He's gonna guide
we were
him.
so close. If wiener was only an option.
Oh no, I ruined it already.
Uh-oh.
Ruined the game.
That was a good one. That was a good one too. I'm surprised. 11:59, about fucking time to show your boobs. Show your boobs. Show yourself or your boobs.
It's clearly D. not A or B.
Yeah, I'm going D.
Well, it's in fact yourself. Show
Rob
yourself.
always goes with the D.
All right. I guess they're more mature than I, at least.
Yep, I would have just gone wieners and boobs the whole time.
That's the Hashtronaut story.
You know, that's the name of the new record. It's just, you heard it here first.
Boobs and wieners.
Mhm.
All right. Well, is there anything else we'd like to say about Faerie Ring's Weary Traveler?
I'm excited to see where they go from here. It's kind of like I was just saying, it's kind of a bummer that I didn't know about these guys beforehand and I didn't get to watch a little bit more of their progression, but I'm glad I'm on board now.
Is there anything you think
they go from here?
They should work on for the next one? Do you think that there's room for improvement anywhere?
I mean, there's always room for improvement. Like I said, I think that, really the only criticism I had of the album was how the lyrics sounded, how the vocals sounded with the music. And I don't know if it was maybe, the effects they were using or just because they used all these, ancient archaic recording techniques. But it really, other than that, I don't, the riffage is great. It's super cohesive. Their tone is awesome. The aesthetic is there. The lyrics are there. Everything, it's got a really nice bow on it. And like I said, just other than that, the vocal mix, I guess I would say, I don't even really know what to call it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
I'll just say what I always say for every album except for Yob and Electric Wizard, and that's go heavier.
I was going to say it'd be cool to hear like a slower, almost an acoustic track with no effect on the vocals, just everything dialed back.
Yeah,
just for one track.
Yeah, add a little light and shade.
That would be well. We didn't really break it down song by song, but there was one song on here that I really the Endless Color Dope Purple. That one was definitely my favorite one because it kind of has. It doesn't really go full acoustic, but it definitely has a lot more dynamic where it gets really soft and really quiet at parts and builds all the way back up.
That's my favorite one too.
Yeah, it's a really good song.
That's kind of seems like a consensus. That's my favorite as well.
It's a great track.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I was going to tell them to work on anything, I'd be like, besides going heavier, always go heavier. Is just working some more on the dynamics, because I don't see this as a problem with this album, but I think it's a real fine line between having flow and being one note, and I don't think that this album is one note at all. I think it flows very nicely, but that's a very dangerous game to play as a musician,
especially in this genre. It's really easy to just pigeonhole yourself.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again to King Volume for this one, and Faerie Ring and James for the video and stuff. That was awesome. So appreciate it. Everybody go check out Faerie Ring. Let's go around a little bit and you can tell everybody what you're up to. Blake, you want to kick that off for us?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm kind of at that point where there's a lot of things in the works that I can't quite speak on quite yet. But King Volume will have some news about my record coming out in coming weeks and months. So
no date for a first single or anything yet, or that you can share. That you can share with us.
Share? No.
Okay. Fair enough.
But stay tuned and give a follow and hopefully look forward to this being a cool year.
Right on. We are too. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, stoked for some new Aiwass, definitely.
Rob?
Yes.
Coming up soon, we're going to finish recording our full length. We're kind of doing a split recording at Green Door here in Denver, and then we're going up to Helveta in Portland to finish out some guitars and stuff. We got a couple dates with Bong Wizard coming up. Doing a little weekender with those guys. June 21st, we're in Denver at the Crypt, and then June 22nd, we're in Laramie, Wyoming at the Roughed Up Duck with those guys. And And then
Definitely a
July,
band
just
following.
back to stuff, back to smoking weed and writing riffs.
Eddie?
The only thing that's in the works right now is the Aiwass has a gig coming up July 22nd at Black Bar with Mongo Doom and Killisan.
Oh, hell yeah.
Before we go to the studio in August.
Heck yeah.
Cool. Right on, guys. That was cool. Appreciate it. Like I said, everybody, thanks for making this episode cool with the video and all that kind of stuff. So we'll catch you on the next one.
Sweet.
Absolutely.
Later.
See you guys.
Later.